Okay, I had in my mind to do the last part of the Lord's Prayer, but yesterday made a sort of last-minute change. This with regards to the COVID-19 coronavirus. And I think I have to address a few things to give it, certainly for us as Christians, a biblical perspective. With regards to that, I want to say once again to those that watch through YouTube to share this video, also maybe with people that you would not normally share it with. Usually these messages are somewhere between half an hour and 50 minutes, so it's not so short. And for many people that's difficult. You know, in YouTube when videos are more than 6 to 8 minutes, people lose their attention. But this is not entertainment, it's a serious business, so I think it's worth to invest this time. So I titled this Give Me Shelter. Give me shelter. And in this time of disaster and disease, because apart from this virus, we often forget, but there is lots of other things going on with regards to so-called natural disasters and wars and other things. In these times, people long for safety and they long for shelter. And the question is, can it be found? And how does this work for Christians in particular? So I've made some little diagrams, some balances or two sides of everything, and in this case also there is a practical aspect and there is a biblical aspect. And the practical is what the world looks at, and they usually view the biblical as not practical. But actually it's very practical, as you will see. The reason that the world, non-Christians, look at biblical things as being non-practical is because they usually think of what God is capable of and what He doesn't do in their view. And so, what kind of God is this? And we don't want to believe in this God, etc. And so there is a second balance, if you will, between what God is capable of and what He is actually doing, what His purpose is, what He is executing. So you have this purpose and possibility. They are two different things. God does not do everything that's possible. He does that what He purposes. And so that's what we have to look at. What is His purpose? What is His purpose for me personally? And what is His purpose for the world, for all of history in general? And that's what we have to look at, to find. And we can know it because it is all here in His Word. And His Word is also His story and it's also history. So it's all in here. And so we can know it. We know that nothing is too hard for God. Nothing is too difficult. And yet many Christians, like non-believers, they get desperate and they ask why? And what now? And we have to seek the answer. We will find it. So, again, we should not look at what God is capable of doing, but we should look at what He says that He is going to do. He has foretold exactly what He's going to do. And in order for that, we have to understand the time we live in. God has said many things in His Word, but they are all in certain periods in history. So if we understand the time we live in, we understand also what events belong to that time and where it's heading. I want to first go to Jeremiah and chapter 30, verse 4. And these are the words that the Lord spake concerning Israel and concerning Judah. Okay, so we stop right here. You say, well, why do you bring this up? It says here it's concerning Israel and Judah. So we are not Israel, so it's not about us. So we have to make another differentiation. So that's the third balance that I drew. It's between Israel and the church. Israel and the church, these are two things. Some believe differently, but there is a remnant of Israel and there is a church. The difference is, you can say it differently, it's physical Israel and the spiritual Israel. We'll get back to that in a minute. There are different plans for both, but they converge at some point. And because they converge, we can look at what is happening to Israel and recognize also where we are. It's like two lines that slowly come together. So if you're on one line and you look to the other and you see it nearing, that means that you're getting to this point where things will converge. And that is the whole reason why Jesus says in Matthew 24, when he speaks about the events at the end of the age, he says, learn the parable of the fig tree. You know, the fig tree is a metaphor for Israel. So he says, look at Israel and you will understand what's happening. And so that is what we ought to do. So we continue in Jeremiah verse 5. For thus saith the Lord, we have heard a voice of trembling, of fear, and not of peace. Now, we recognize this, I think. Ask ye now, and see whether a man doth travail with child. Wherefore do I see every man with his hands on his loins, as a woman in travail, and all faces turned into paleness. So he is painting a picture here of fear, great fear. Voice of trembling, fear, and then also the faces turn to paleness. But when does this take place? With the metaphor he's using here, it points to a unique time. A unique time that is only happening once ever. Because it says, when do you see a man travail a child? When does a man, not a woman, a man give birth? This does not happen. Have you ever seen something like this? That is the idea. Have you ever seen something like this? You haven't. This is unique. This is unheard of. These are unique times that we are facing. That is what he speaks about. And so, it's not things that happen throughout history and they just happen also in our generation. It is very unique events that happen only in that specific time. You have never seen something like that before. And so, unless God provides a place of safety and escape, there's no hope. And we will also face these unique times. So he continues then in verse 7, Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. So here he says it again, there is nothing like this. And it is even at the time of Jacob's trouble. But he shall be saved out of it. Again, he speaks here about Jacob. Jacob's trouble, we know, well, all of us who have studied a little bit about the end times events, Jacob's trouble refers to the tribulation period, the 7 years. That is this unique, once in history time that he speaks about. And again, he speaks about Israel and Judah and Jacob. These are words that clearly refer to the remnant of Israel, not to the church. And he says, Jacob, they will be saved out of it. This implies two things, or it says one thing and it implies another second thing. They shall be saved. That is good news. They shall be saved. But it says they shall be saved out of it, which means they are in it. They will be in the midst of it, of all this trouble. But they will be saved out of it. So, the protection will not come until they have suffered through at least part of it. And This is exactly what Jesus says when he speaks about these very same times in Matthew 24, in verse 21, 22. Also there he speaks about Israel, not about the church. And he says, "For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be." Again he says the same thing. It's unique. This happens only once. There's nothing that compares to it. "And except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened." This last half sentence is often misquoted. There are two things, the elect and there is the shortening of the days. So the elect in this context, and this is consistent by the way in scripture, the elect refers to the remnant of Israel, not to the church. Not that the church is not elect as being the bride of Christ, but this is not what is referred to with this word. And if once you get this, it makes all very much sense. And shortening of the day does not mean that instead of 24 hours it's going to be 20 hours or 18 hours. Shortening of the days is just an expression that means that the time will be cut short. They will be saved out of it, so they don't need to endure the whole period of trouble. That is what shortening of time means. So, now, back to us. Does this mean we are in the tribulation period now? No. Again, it speaks about Israel, not about the church. However, Jesus says in the same chapter 24, look at the parable of the fig tree. You will understand what's happening if you look at them. The church will actually precede Israel. The events that happen to Israel happen, maybe less severe, but in the same way they happen to the church. The way of escape that is prepared for Israel is also prepared for the church. So we see that these two, they don't run parallel, but the church runs ahead, so to speak. And in Luke 21, which is the parallel chapter to Matthew 24, Jesus says, when he gives all these signs, and he says in verse 36, "Watch ye therefore and pray always that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man." So there is a way of escape. There is a way of escape. So that's why I call this the theme of today, give me shelter, escape, safety. This place of safety, well, it's there, and it's promised. The end times that we live in, and we live in the end times, they are a foreshadow of the tribulation that is coming. We see many of the same events, but in less severity, we see them happening now. So that's why I made this diagram, and you see there is end times, and they end with a rapture. That is the escape. That is this first arrow that goes up. And underneath that you see the church. The church lives through the end times, and the escape, the end of that, when their days will be cut short, so to speak, their time shall be shortened, and end to the suffering is the rapture. And that's the church, that's the vine. It's compared with the vine. In John 15, Jesus uses this picture. And I explain these metaphors of the trees in a separate video called the three trees: the vine, the fig, and the olive tree. So the church is the vine. Then you see Israel, or the remnant of Israel. That's what we read about in Jeremiah. They are the fig tree. That's what Jesus says. Look at the parable of the fig tree. They will go into the tribulation, but they will be saved out of there as a way of escape for them as well. And that is described in Revelation 12. And we did a separate study of that as well, where we explain all these details about that. The world, the non-believers, I would actually say the rebels, they will go through all of this. This doesn't mean that all of them will survive all of this. Many will die throughout all this period. but they will not escape. So we see that what happens to Israel happens also to the church first, actually. They will go through suffering and they will escape it. And that's what we see today in our world. That's the time we live in. And this unique, once-in-a-lifetime time is actually the tribulation period that follows this. But we are already seeing the shadow of it. And the shadow is not nice. And so you can imagine how terrible this period will be. The shadow is just a pale reflection and it's already ugly. So let's look at some more prophetic text. I want to go to Amos. Prophet Amos chapter 5 and verse 3. The pictures that the prophets use, they really things to think about. This picture that we just read from Jeremiah, have you ever seen a man giving birth? These things don't happen. It's poetic in a sense, but it's also showing the uniqueness of what we live in. You have to really think about this. And here in verse 3, chapter 5, it says, "For thus said the Lord God, the city that went out by 1,000 shall leave 100, and that which went forth by 100 shall leave 10 to the house of Israel." Again, he speaks about the house of Israel, but this very grim picture, only 1/10 survives, is what it's basically saying here. It will be very, very bad. And that is why God has to intervene at some point. Otherwise, Jesus says no flesh would be alive. In verse 18 then it says, "Woe unto you that desire the day of the Lord." The day of the Lord is that time that begins with the tribulation. "Woe to you that desire the day of the Lord. To what end is it for you? The day of the Lord is darkness and not light." This is the question. You long for it, or what will it bring you? It's all darkness. "As if a man did flee from a lion," verse 19, "and a bear met him, or went into the house and leaned his hand on the wall, and a serpent bit him." This is this biblical Hebrew poetic language that you really have to think about. In 2011 I did a presentation in several places and churches, and I titled it back then "Roaring Lion." And this is of course from 1 Peter 5 verse 8. But I remember saying several times at the beginning of this presentation to the people, imagine I had a cage here on the stage and with a lion in it, and I would open it. Would you just remain sitting calmly in your seat? Well, probably not. You would run and get out as fast as possible, hoping that the lion would not get you. Because when it gets you, you know the end of it. And this is the picture he uses here. A lion. A man fleeing from a lion. If you run and a lion is behind you, well, you run as fast as you couldn't imagine so fast you could run, with everything that is in you and more, because it's a matter of life and death. And imagine this picture that somehow you manage to escape the lion. You're totally out of breath. You're also relieved. Fine, I'm still alive. I managed to escape him. And you look next to you, and what do you see? A bear. And a bear is showing his teeth. And you thought you had no energy left, but somehow you have to go and run for your life once more to escape the bear. And miraculously you manage to get inside your house and close the door, and the bear is outside, and you're safe. And you're dead tired, you lean against the wall, and there's a snake and it bites you. That is how it will be. It will be relentless. There is just no escape, and you think you escaped the one, and the next will be upon you. That is what this time of tribulation will be. And that is what we see the shadow of right now. It's unrelenting terror. And really this picture you have to really think about this, to understand it. And I don't say these things to instill fear or panic. This is what we hear all the time now in the media and everywhere. that if you're realistic, if you present the things as they are, then you're either fear-mongering, or you are afraid, or you're causing panic. Well, hopefully not causing panic, but awareness, so that people take the right action. That is the whole point. The question here is God able to protect us in time like this? Well, He's able, He's capable, He can do anything. Of course He can. The other question is, will He protect you? Will He protect me? That depends. It depends basically on you and me. And of course God has a purpose for you, but the purpose for you and me and for everyone is to become His and citizen of His kingdom. Basically the purpose is the same, but we take all different routes to get there, unfortunately. Because there's only one way, so if we choose that right from the beginning, we're good to go, but we don't. And many take other ways, and that will lead to destruction. If you are in His will, the end will always be good. And with that I mean spiritually, eternally. Not physically, not in this world. It might be very ugly in this world. We see Christians being persecuted, tortured, beheaded, all kinds of things. It's ugly. But nevertheless, if they are true Christians, their end is good. Their end is good. You can read this in the Revelation also of the tribulation saints. Blessed are those that die in the name for the testimony of Jesus. They are blessed. And so eventually that's what we have to look on our eternal destiny. And of course we want quality of life. Of course we want to be healthy. Of course we want to stay out of trouble and misery. But this world is going through these times, and we cannot always escape it. But when we are in His will, when we are in His hands, we can feel secure even in spite of all that is happening around us. And just an example, and it's we from Psalm 3 I want to go through. We studied this, so I think it's the first video of our channel messages. But anyway, this is the Psalm 3 is about King David. He was already king, but his son Absalom, he was rebelling, and he wanted to take over power, and he was after the life of his father. And so David had to flee. He was strongly in a minority. Absalom had gathered many people in the army and everything he had on his side. So David had to flee and for his own life. And he was in a very bad situation. And he writes in Psalm 3 in verse 5, he says, I laid me down and slept. I awakened, for the Lord sustained me. Now, if you read this, okay. He went to sleep and he woke up. So what? But again, this is all poetic language. What he means is he went to sleep in the evening and he fell asleep. He didn't lay awake for hours thinking of all the misery that could happen to him, that he lost what he had and all this thing. He fell asleep. He was at peace. And he awakened in the morning. He slept the whole night through. He didn't wake up 10 times and all this. He slept the whole night through and he woke up in the morning. And he was good. Why? Because the Lord sustained me. You read the whole psalm and you see the mindset he had during that hard time. And mind you, he was sleeping on rocks in caves and all this. He didn't have a nice warm bed. That is how you can be fully at peace even in time of great tribulation. So, next question is then maybe, does God's children, are they always spared from disaster? No, they're not. You can say this with confidence. Just look around you in the world, it's clear. Look at the many stories in Scripture, it's clear. They suffer too, and they too die, and they too find tribulation in this world. Actually, that's literally what Jesus said. In this world you will find tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. So we won't escape it. Not some of us will, but certainly not all of us. But there comes a moment that God draws a line. There comes a moment that God draws a line. And it's very interestingly, I actually never noticed this before in Exodus 8. That's the story of before the Israelites leave Egypt, so they are captive in Egypt, laboring, slaves basically. And God then sends Moses to lead them out. And Moses pleads with the Pharaoh, but Pharaoh's heart is hardened. And then these plagues, these 10 plagues come upon Egypt. And we see that as the Israelites, they live in Egypt, they also suffer from these plagues. Just as the Egyptians do. But then, after the 3rd plague, God speaks to Moses, and in verse 22, chapter 8 of Exodus, he says, "And I will sever in that day the land of Goshen, in which my people dwell, that no swarm of flies shall be there. To the end thou mayest know that I am the Lord in the midst of the earth, and I will put a division between my people and thy people, between the Israelites and the Egyptians. Tomorrow shall this sign be." And so these were the swarms of flies that came, and the flies did not go into Goshen where the Israelites were. Of course, God controls all of nature, also flies. And from that moment on, the rest of the plagues, they did not come upon the Israelites. They only came upon the Egyptians. So God was clearly showing both to the Egyptians, I am their God, and to the Israelites, I'm your God, and I'm protecting you, even in this time of tribulation. Interesting side note is that it were 10 plagues. 3 were for all, 7 were only for the Egyptians. So think of the tribulation period, which is 7 years. Israel was spared for these 7 years. It's a type of the church. Israel there is a type of the church that is spared from the 7 years of tribulation. Again, one other type pointing to pre-tribulation rapture. But what we see is also this picture that I put in this diagram. There is a time where everyone suffers all these plagues. That's the time we live in now. That's the end times. But then God draws a line. That's the rapture. He takes out the church. And but that is also on a micro scale in each one of our lives. We go through suffering until God draws a line. And the line can be physical, spiritual, or both. Which means it can be that He physically spares us from disaster, diseases, and whatnot. It can also be spiritual, that we still go through it, but we don't suffer in our spirit from it. We have peace, like King David in Psalm 3. So this deliverance can come in different ways. Jesus gives the same picture, or prophecy I should actually say, in Matthew 24. There is also a line drawn there. And of course we did a very in-depth study, a whole series of videos about Matthew 24. Because again, this is so often, these verses are taken out of context, but it's the same thing. It's this, what I put in the diagram. There is end times, there is a rapture, then there is the tribulation period, and there is the escape for the remnant of Israel. All of that is in Matthew 24. So when we look at our times now, where we live in today, that we can read in verse 6, it says, "And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet." You will see these things, it says. You will see them, you will hear them, you will maybe be in the midst of them. Don't be troubled. It must come to pass. The end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. Usually we read this, there will be earthquakes in divers places. It's not what it says. Read carefully. It says there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in diverse places. All of these will be in diverse places. In our Western mindset, famines and pestilences, they belong to third world countries. They don't happen to us. Now they're happening to us. And this is what Jesus said, they will happen in diverse places. This expression, diverse places, in modern language you would say they happen all over the place. That is what it means. And that also shows how much it fits in our time in history. Even a few hundred years ago, if there was a famine in India, you wouldn't know in the US or in Europe. Now we know instantly what's happening everywhere. And we see exactly this. All these are the beginning of sorrows. Just the beginning. And then I skip to verse 13, because he mentions some more things, but skip to verse 13. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. There is the division. Now he says, you have suffered through the 3 plagues, the other 7, so to speak, I will take you out. Verse 13 is the division line, and it is this first arrow up that I put in the diagram. That is the rapture. And you see right away after that, he speaks about Judah, about Jerusalem, about the holy place, the temple. It's all about the remnant of Israel and the tribulation period. Okay, we go to Psalm 91, psalm that is read a lot these days, because all of a sudden people in the West are confronted with a deadly pestilence, and this is a psalm that gives many comfort. But let's first read a few verses. The first 3 verses. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. So, it speaks about certain people, not about everyone to begin with. It speaks about those that dwell in the secret place of the Most High. And so, many think they are, but you really have to ask yourself, do I indeed dwell there in the secret place of the Most High? If that you abide under the shadow of the Almighty, I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress. My God, in Him I will trust. Surely He shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence. And now this is, I will read a few other verses as well, but this is often used to say, well, you see, He will spare you from pestilence. And that's what we're facing now. So trust in the Lord and you will be spared from pestilence. Now, first of all, what is the word pestilence here? It appears 2 more times in the same psalm, and King James consistently translates this Hebrew word with pestilence, which for us right away we make the translation to a disease like a virus. The Hebrew word that is originates this from, it means actually plague, or for example, the Jewish Bible translates it, the English Jewish Bible translates it with plague of calamity. So it's something that plagues you. And it can be a disease, but it can be disaster, war, persecution, all these things. So the plagues that overcame the Egyptians in Moses' time, it's the same word. These are plagues. So he delivers us from these plagues, and He does. We just read it. Not right from the beginning, but there is a point when He draws the line. He says, no more. Here, now you're delivered from this, you're taken away from this, you're saved from this. So that's the first consideration here. The second one is, what I put in the second balance, there's a difference between what God can do and what He will do. There is a difference between how He operates in general, and there is a difference between how He operates in this one unique time that we have never seen before. And that's why I started with this verse in Jeremiah. This is something totally different. So, if we then continue with this psalm and verse 4, He shall cover thee with His feathers, and under His wings shalt thou trust. His trust shall be thy shield and buckler. There is great comfort in this psalm. It doesn't literally say you will never get an illness, as some believe. And again, the practice, if you just look around you, it shows that that's not so. History shows that is not so. Even Scripture shows that is not so. But His trust shall be your shield and your buckler. You have comfort there. Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror at night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day. That trust, that faith, it drives away fear. Nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. There shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. Here we see plague, the word plague. So there is protection. There is protection. God will do things so that we can see His intervention. But in spite of this psalm, and in spite of Psalm 3, which King David writes it from his personal experience, and many other psalms, in spite of that, we look at a time now that is unique. It is the last days, it's the tribulation, it's a time unheard of. The time when the Israelites were in Egypt as slaves and when they were led out, it was a unique event. And so is this. It's a unique event. We are not of the world, but we are still in the world. And therefore, the things that happen to the world are also going to affect the church members, the church meaning the body of Christ, at least to some degree. Pestilences, earthquakes, wars, economic crisis, they do not skip our house and go to the next one. We will also be affected. And yet we can find comfort and hope and peace in 1 Corinthians 10 verse 13. And I was going to read this verse anyway, also with the other theme. But anyway, it says that there had no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that you may be able to bear it. He speaks here about temptation, which again in our perception has a certain meaning, but when we speak about the last part of the Lord's Prayer is about this, about lead us not into temptation, we see that this is also means trial, tests, and not so much temptation that we are tempted to do something wrong. By the enemy, that is. So, but what does he say here in this verse? There hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. Such as is common to man. He says the trials that overcome you, speaking here to the church, they are the same things that other people are facing. It is not something special, something unique, something different that is only for the church. You will have the same experience as the rest of the world. They are unavoidable. They overcome you as well. When there is an earthquake, all the Christians in this area, their houses are also shaking. This is the way it is. These things happen. But God will say then here, He says there is a way to escape. There is a way to escape. Now, if you go to the original language, it doesn't say there's a way to escape. King James says, RSV doesn't say this, the new, or the complete Jewish Bible also doesn't say a way to escape, it says the way to escape. And that's a big difference. God does not provide a way to escape, He provides the way to escape. The way. Because there's only one. There's only one right way, and there's only one way that God provides. There's not more than one. So, here you see a similar thing that we read in Jeremiah in the beginning. Where God says, I'm talking about Israel and the house of Judah, they will be saved out of it. Here it's the same. There will be a way to escape. In order to escape, you have to be first in the threat or calamity, whatever it is. Then you can escape from it. So, Christians are going through these things as well. What God is waiting for is our response to this. What are we waiting for? What are we counting on? Where are we putting our trust? Are we putting our trust indeed in a way to escape? Maybe a way that the world provides. Are we counting on that? Hoping for that? Or are we trusting and finding peace in the way that God has provided to escape? That way requires faith. It requires faith. The purpose of all this is not to throw us into fear, and the purpose of what Paul is writing here to the Corinthians is also not to say you have to be fearful and submit. If we submit out of fear, well, I would say it's better than nothing. At least you submit to the Lord, but that is not His intention. He doesn't want to scare us into believing into Him. The purpose is that we seek His way, that one way that He provided, that we seek it and that we find shelter under His wings. That is such a beautiful picture that we see literally in nature. Many birds do this. They shelter their young under the wings, protect them from the outside world, from all these threats. And when you look at young birds, they have actually no clue of the threats around them. They have no idea. They don't go under the wings because they're afraid. They go under the wings because it's a good place to be. It's a secure place. They don't even know what is threatening them. And actually, the same is towards we have hardly an idea of what is upon us, especially from the spiritual realm. So, we seek His protection. We find shelter under His wings. We enjoy His love. And we have faith in Him. It is King David describes it very, very good, I would say in Psalm 3, that he goes to sleep in peace, and he sleeps the whole night like a baby, so to speak, and he gets up in the morning renewed, because he is secure, he is safe, he finds shelter with the Lord. The Lord will draw a separation line, and He will do so in your personal life first. If He has not drawn the separation line in your life, then the other separation line that He has for the church, you will not be part of it. So this has to be first, this separation line. It's very important. This is where you go from being of the world and being in the world, but no longer of the world. And this other separation line for the church, that happens only once in history. It's unique. This is upon us soon. This is upon us soon. And we know it from what we see around us. We know it when we look at the fig tree. In particular, there's very strong things there that maybe I will address also one of these days, Lord willing. But just like the Israelites in Egypt, we will suffer through part of the plagues before the escape comes. And I can also say there will be Christians that get sick and that die. Just as there are Christians today that are persecuted and killed, just as there are Christians today that are in car accidents and die, and go on and on. So this is just happening, and God knows every individual one He has a plan for them. He is working with them, and each one has its limit in time in this life. As we move toward the Passover season, we are reminded that we are the bride of Christ. That is a picture, that a type that is used a lot in the Bible, and we are actually not so much the bride, but actually the bride to be, because the wedding has not taken place. It will be consummated in heaven. But when Jesus has the Last Supper, then this is a type of the betrothal. And so it should remind us of this position we are in. Now, if you look at the bride, a bride to be, the bride to be doesn't stay faithful because she's scared of her future husband. She stays faithful because she loves him. This is all it is. It's love. So that should be our position. And the bride to be knows that soon, when the groom has finished their future house, in the tradition of the Bible, then he will come to get her. The wedding, the marriage will be consummated. She will leave her own family. She will leave her old life. She will leave the world that she is used to, and she will enter a different life. That is what we look forward to. That is part of the escape. We leave this world, we leave this life, we leave all these things that we are used to, and we will enter into our eternal home. And so all this, what's happening around us, should focus us even more, because to be honest, I think, I'm sure actually, many, if not most, Christians have become way too used to this world, to their life, to their routine. Well, your routine is broken now. Everything's different. So think of that. That is how you should have been living all this time, with a broken routine, actually not being used to this world. And so find shelter with the Lord, just as the bride knows soon she finds shelter with her husband. And she looks forward to it because she loves him. And so, what is the name of the husband? His name is Yeshua, Jesus. And beautifully enough, his name means exactly that. Shelter, salvation. Often we say Jesus, Yeshua means God saves, or salvation from God, but there's two meanings. It is Yahshua, which means Yah is Yahweh, is God. Shua is salvation, or safety. So Yahshua is God saves. But you can break the same word also differently, and Yeshua. And Yeshu is salvation, and is the plural masculine form. So it literally means salvation, shelter, safety. That is what it means. So, give me shelter, today's title. You can say also, give me Yeshua. That's what it is. And that's actually where we have to find our shelter. That is the wing that God has for us to find shelter under. And there are many, many ways that seem to lead to an escape, but they lead to destruction. And there's only one way that leads. That is the way of escape, as Paul words it in 1 Corinthians 10. The way of escape is one. And so the question is, which way do you go? Amen.